testing it out to see if that's actually the way that it's going. So if it's not taking place like that, please forgive me. The audio is what I am looking at now. I have been informed in regard to my social media person that it's necessary for me to actually do video. I have been very hesitant to do video for any variety of reasons, but none of them really good. And so I want to follow through with this. I think it's important. I think it's important for a variety of reasons. One is that I have something that I want to really communicate to individuals. And basically it is that we have the ability as individuals, no matter who we are, to really plot and to bring forth that which we want to do. Let's say what we want to be, do, and have in life. It is because we are made in God's image. It is because we are God's children. And we're God's children because of the fact that God is God. And all of the sacred books from the beginning of time, from what I can tell, articulate this idea. It is found in the Bible. It is found in the Bhagavad Gita. It is found in the Tao Te Ching. It is found in all of the books. All of the great leaders, the mystics as they are called, or the prophets, all of them have articulated this same idea in various ways. It has taken me years of study and years of learning how to study to bring me to this point in my life. Now, please understand that I talk about prayer in a variety of ways, and I've had many experiences of prayer. Of late, I've begun to talk about this entire aspect of what I call KIAH, which means know it already happened. And then following that, there's KSAA, which means know, stated, accept, and announce. That's really a term that follows a number of things that have happened in my life, one of which when I was introduced to the law of attraction, which was about 2009. But 2009 was not the beginning of my experience with that. I had already, at a particular point in my life, I had determined that I would go to college based on the aspect of having grown up in a family where none of my siblings had actually graduated from high school. But I had determined at a particular point in my life when I was young that I would go to college. That was based on the fact that I had some teachers and counselors that actually encouraged me to do that. And those counselors, as a result of my taking tests, decided that I was able to go to college and to do well in college. They looked at the tests. Miss Blunt, Miss Elliott looked at the tests at Carver Junior High School. It was junior high school, named after, I believe, George Washington Carver. They looked at the tests, and when they called me aside, they told me that I was capable of doing college work. And so I listened to them. I took what they said to be correct, and I planted it inside of me, or they planted it inside of me, that I could go to college. As a result of that, I determined that I would go, and they had actually, I was in around the 8th grade, perhaps even the 7th grade, when they did it for me, and I determined that I would go to college. Now, please understand that at that time, or very shortly after that time, either before or after, something which I consider very tragic happened in my life, and that was that my sister, my older sister, I've written about this, I've talked about it, one of my older sisters, one that was very dear to me, actually had died. And when she died, it actually changed my entire life. She was very dear to me. And as a result of that, there were things that I forgot and did not know that I had forgotten them. And it took me a very long time to wake up, as I say, from that particular item. But I did graduate from high school. And I was the first. She would have been the first, but I was the first to graduate from my school, with a high school, my family with a high school. That's of my mother's children. My mother was a high school graduate. My uncle was a high school graduate. My father was not a high school graduate. He had to work on the farm. He told me, as a result of being the oldest of 9 children, I believe, and him being the oldest, had to work on the farm. I saw recently this movie again called Men of Honor, in which the father that was there gave his son that radio, you may remember, and then that radio he gave him, and he told him, don't ever come back to this farm. Well, my father wasn't exactly like that. He wasn't living on the farm, but he knew the farm. He worked on the farm. He was raised on the farm. When I was born, he was not working on the farm like that, but he was a farmer. He really was a man of the farm and the field and of the seasons. He never really fit within the city, but he worked on the farm. He knew how to fish. He knew how to hunt. It took me a long time to actually value the aspect of him being able to do those many things. And he showed me how that, and I did learn to love him as a result of that. It was actually after he had passed away that I wrote something called A Letter to My Father to understand his value. But my mama taught me how to read, how to write, how to do math. She taught me those kinds of things, and I treasured them because I grew up loving to read, loving books, and those kinds of things. And so, as I said, I did graduate from school. And then I eventually also went to college. My uncle had gone to Hampton University. He had stayed there 3 years, eventually joined the military. And then also he had gone, and then I eventually, of course, also went to college. And when I went to college the first time, I went to college to study for the ministry. And then later went to graduate school, also got the doctorate of ministry degree, and then went to further to get a PhD, did all the courses for that. So again, I was the first of my mother's children to graduate from high school, from college, and then also to go to graduate school. And please understand that a number of individuals, after I did that, went forth in that way. Those individuals in my mother's family are in the genealogy of my family, my mother and father. They have done the same thing. And my relatives, of course, beyond my father's family and all around really have done the same thing. And so that whole piece, but all of that is part of the moving of God in my life. All of that, because it took a lot of prayer moving through those entire things. And so as a result of becoming a minister, I did learn to pray. I actually learned affirmations because of the fact that the church that I joined had an individual who was one of the original founders of the church, and she had written a book called The Ministry of Healing. Now, it was inside of that book that there was an item. She wrote an item that I remember to this very day, in which she said that our thoughts, our words are strengthened and made stronger as we give them utterance, something to that effect. That's not an exact quote, but they are made stronger as a result of our giving them utterance. And if we would change, rather than speaking of them, we would speak of things that are positive, beneficial, things that would actually move us toward our goals. If we would begin to also praise God for the blessings that we already had, we would actually move in a more positive, beneficial direction. Those things, when you look at the law of attraction, they're called affirmations. And so I had read that previously. I had also studied what was called, written by a man named Glenn Coons, a book called The ABCs of Prayer. It said, ask, believe, claim by returning thanks. Now, in the law of attraction, that's called the whole aspect of treatment. So it wasn't called prayer, it was called treatments. And it put it in the idea of something being something that was like a professional who would be a doctor. And that person would actually treat someone. They would treat someone. A doctor has a practice, and practitioners had a practice. That's what they called an individual who gave treatments. Now, I initially thought in 2009, and then later when I went to meet one of the individuals that were in the DVD or in the movie that was called The Secret, Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, went to see him in the church that he led there called the Agape International Spiritual Center. I went to visit that church in California, drove like 3,000 miles, my wife Vielka and I. We went to that particular church and learned from him and from his practitioner, Miss Sprinkles, if I'm saying that correctly, and a lot of other individuals there at the Agape International Spiritual Center. That was so much later, but went to learn, go to the source. You know how they say that. And I was blessed very much by that. But learned there what it meant to be someone who was praying and treating in regard to that. They treated us wonderfully, by the way, meaning when we got there, they welcomed us with open arms, put us in classes with advanced individuals, and we just had a wonderful time. So after I learned about The Secret, I went to study with the individuals who were really part of the entire community. I did not know of that community prior to that. And then Dr. Beckwith actually came and became our guest at our Evolve conference that we had a couple years later. This was in 2012 when he came to be a part of what we were doing. And so we were learning how to actually do this. However, let me go back again. After I became a minister, as I said, I studied some more. I learned to pray, and even before I had learned to pray, my life has changed as a result of getting it together, or the Spirit of God working in me. And as a minister, I had actually done a number of things that had taken place. I had seen people heal. I had seen people get up off their deathbed. One story that I will tell you about is that I had a member of the church, the first church that I pastored. Actually, there were 3 churches. They were in Salem, White Sparrow, and Bridgeton, New Jersey. And I had a member of my church who said that her mother was in the hospital and they expected that she would die. I went to that church and I pastored that church. And what took place was this dear lady asked me if I would visit her mother. She was in the hospital, and I was going to go visit her. It was early in the morning. I had to drive maybe 2 hours, and then I would be at the hospital. And it took me a while to get there. Of course, I did not know exactly where I was going, and probably made a few wrong turns and everything like that. And by the time I got there, I was tired. And so I got to the hospital. When I got into the room, you may have heard this before, I got in the room, and the lady had tubes coming into every crevice of her body, everywhere. There were tubes going into her body everywhere. And she looked like she was really, really sick. At any rate, I got there, and I started asking her all the questions that ministers asked at that time. Have you accepted Jesus Christ? Do you know Jesus Christ? Are you sure you're going to go to heaven? Blank, blank, blank. Thinking that I'm preparing this woman to die. And at the particular point, what it seems to me like Spirit says, sit down. I would say almost like, sit down, fool. And I know Spirit doesn't perhaps say that. But at any rate, that's how I felt. I sat down and I went to sleep. I was tired. And I slept for a little bit. And then at the end of my sleeping, I woke up, and then I went over to her bed. I said my prayers, and then I went home. A few days later, the lady got out of the hospital. She not only got out of the hospital, she went home, and she told her family about this angel that had come to visit her. And she then told them about a life that she had prior to having any of them as children that involved wealth, funds that she had, land that she had, all kinds of things. And then she, having talked to them about that, told them where all of those things were. And she said to them that I was actually to do her funeral. I believe I went to visit this particular lady once at her home with her children. And then later, I think she was out of the hospital for maybe 90 days. And I went to visit her at her home during that 90 days. The next call I got was to visit her again in the hospital. Again, I did the same thing. I got in the car, drove, got lost again, and arrived at the hospital. I got to the hospital, and by the time I got up to her room, she had been dead 4 minutes. I then drove back home. I went inside my home, and I would not come out of the house. I could not understand what was happening to me. I could not understand what was happening to me at that time. It was my first pastorate. I could not understand. I was trying to work with the aspect, had I done everything that I needed to do? Was I a good minister? Was all of these things? And it happened that maybe I think I preached her funeral. I believe I did. And then I just wouldn't, other than that, I don't think I came out. What they had to do was that I had to do communion one night. And what took place was that having to do communion, they sent a deacon to come pick me up, an elder to come pick me up. And what I did was, when he came, he was an older man, and he started talking to me, ministering to me. And he asked me, like, what's going on with you? And I began to explain to him what I was feeling and everything like that. And he began to talk to me about the ministry of the presence, or incarnational ministry, as I have begun to talk about it now. Incarnational ministry, being there, and said that I represented the presence of Jesus Christ to this lady. And as he said it, it began to make sense. He said she thought that God had forsaken her, and that because I was there as a minister of the gospel, that she recognized that God had not forgotten her, that God still loved her, that God still knew her name, and that therefore God loved her, knew her, had never left her, that she was God's child. And it made sense from that time to this time. She knew that God loved her. So should you. And so I began to study this deeper, this incarnational ministry idea. And I've read and studied and looked at the lives of others, the writings of others, books that are written years before I ever discovered the secret. The word law of attraction is in books. The idea of it is in books. I've got books by a man named Warren Felt Evans. I've got books by an individual. I've got books that say that this is something that individuals study years. When Emerson was writing in the 1800s, he began to study the East. I've got a book by a man named Sir Abunidino, I believe. I may be saying that wrong in regard to what his name is, but I've got his book. And let me just spell his name for you so you know that I've got it. It's Sri, maybe, S-R-I. It's spelled A-U-R-O-B-I-N-D-O. The book is called The Life Divine. Somebody asked me why I like old books. I didn't know it was old. It has a copyright date of 1970, the one that I have, but I've been reading it. And the law of attraction is really inside of this book. And the idea of the divinity of the human is inside that book as well. In fact, I had talked with an individual that somewhere near me, and I said, I am Brahmin. That individual then showed me a cord that he has, like the Hebrew priests have, certain cords that they wear. And that individual then said, I am Brahmin. And that's a priestly class that understands their relationship with the divine. And so it seems to me that there are certain individuals who understand who they are, their relationship with God. As a matter of fact, the other day I was in a particular situation, and an individual, I was asking them about their relationship spiritually, and they said to me that they belong to the churches, one of the 7 churches, they said, that was originally started by the Apostle Thomas. Now, I think I had read about this before, but I had never met anyone that had been a member of one of these churches, the 7 churches of Thomas that were started by the Apostle of Jesus the Christ after Jesus the Christ had been crucified. And this Apostle Thomas had gone to India. So before this, it seemed something someone had said or I had read in the book, but I was never met anybody in regard to that. And so when I speak of these things that I have had and gone through and everything like that, it is with that type of experience, that type of background of reading the Bhagavad Gita, of seeing various things where it talks about the relationship between Krishna and the Arjuna, if I'm saying that correctly, and trying to understand that. Thinking of the various things that are said in regard to the relationships between these mystics, these holy individuals that have come down through time, and seeking to value everyone, because I am one of the individuals who was born in these United States of America. And it says we are endowed by our Creator here in these United States of America with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then just recently, based on today, we're in the month of June, the year 2023, an individual from India came here, and he was asked about whether or not his country he was a prime minister, I think it's called, of India, Modi, if I'm saying that correctly. If not, I apologize. But he was asked whether or not that was the largest democracy in the world, and was religious freedom there. He said yes. I'd already heard about a company there. It's named Sepla. It's the mnemonic, I believe that's the word for it, that is used for the name. That's not his name, but it's CIPLA. It's a pharmaceutical company. And at the time when the drugs that are used to help individuals who have HIV, they were HIV positive. And there were people who were dying in mass numbers in regard to that. And the pharmaceutical companies at the time were charging something like $1,500 for, I think it is, drugs that would last a month or something like that. But you had people in other parts of the world who were making $2 a day. Or that was the amount of their daily amount, $2 a day. And that would have amounted to only $600, 32 times, what is it? 2 times 30 would be what? $60? $60 a month. And they needed $1,500 to buy the drug. So they were dying. And this company, Sepla, did what they call reverse engineering of a drug. And rather than having a synthetic base, they made it with a plant base. And they made it so that it could be sold for far less than it was being sold by the big pharma, as they call it. And it was because that Mahatma Gandhi, has said, put the people ahead of prophets. The people ahead of prophets. The people ahead of prophets. Thou art endowed by your Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so these things become important when it becomes that you want to be a melting pot, as America was originally endowed and said to become. This melting pot where individuals, once they set their feet on these shores, they had certain inalienable rights when they got here. Once they came on these shores, any shores that were a part of these United States of America, it was like we were all God's children. That's the idea. And we're to be treated as God's children. We're to be treated in such a way that if we would work, if we would use and just say, this is who I am, this is what I do, then we could determine what we would have. That's the way it works. And I believe that to be true. I believe that not just to be true, but to be truth. And so, are there challenges? Yes. Are there challenges? But I believe, based on the aspect that I've seen individuals, whether it's the individuals, of course, who've had to deal with something called slavery in the United States of America, where we fought a civil war. My ancestor, Moses Evans, fought in the Civil War. Fought in the Civil War. As a matter of fact, on the side of my English ancestors, they fought in the American Revolutionary War. Yes, I have them. I am one of those sons of the American Revolution. Yes, I am. So, when I look at this whole thing, I am American. People talk about, go back to where you come from. Well, who is that? Who is that? Who in the world is that? I look at this place. It is a place of opportunity for everybody. But a person must know who he or she is. And they must be determined to run his or her own mind. They must run that mind in such a way that they understand that there's a place of solace within the individual that they can run. There was slavery. There was the Holocaust. As far as I know, those are true experiences in life. And it does take a great deal of work, at least for me. It has taken a great deal of work for me, and it still takes work for me to move forward in life. But I keep praying. And beyond that, I keep seeing miracles, what I consider to be miracles, that keep happening for other individuals all around me. I've been blessed to have a family, to see children grow up, grandchildren grow up, and to see that there have been progress made in various ways. And it's a result of, no, it already happened. I had a dream that I told my daddy. My daddy told my uncle. My uncle told me I was called to the ministry. Based on that dream, he was a minister. And I'm simply, out of gratitude for the goodness of God in my life, seeking to carry that out. I see that what I'm asked to do is to bring forth a spiritual center, because by the grace of God I can. I've done it before. And I'm still here. And we're seeking to do it now. We've prayed just recently, still praying for an individual who was in the hospital dealing with a whole aspect of having a situation with his brain. We've got a minister that is in Nigeria that we're working with about having what we call our next Evolve conference, but we're going to do on 2 continents next time, 2024, 2025. That's our intent. Pray with us in regard to these things that we're talking about. We have a spiritual center, Spirit of Victory and Praise International Spiritual Center is our spiritual center. It's a non-profit organization. We have a coaching company, Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting, and we have clients that we've worked with. And we teach our clients, first of all, to become their best self. We deal with individuals who have inherited and cultivated tendencies to move outside of what's best for them. And we teach them these principles so that they work with and they move forward toward their goal of becoming their authentic self. Do they succeed all the time? No. Who does? So we teach them to move forward and to stay focused. And they've done pretty good. They've had great success, in my estimation. And really in the results they get, financial and otherwise. And they're getting better every day. We train coaches. Our individuals have gone on, helped other businesses, done all kinds of things. We celebrate what they do. We are thankful for what they do, what happens with them. We are grateful for what they do. So, as I said, my social media manager is now managing me. And she said, I've got to do better. I absolutely have to do better. So this is my intent with what I'm doing here. I know this has been long, but I'm just trying to follow direction in regard to what she said. I don't know how successful I have been in regard to all of this, so forgive me for that. And I'm seeking to just follow God in regard to all of this material. I think what took place here is that the light went out on the camera because I think I have my computer set in such a way that it goes dark. But I have to look at this and see what happens. But the material for the iPod is the podcast is being caught, I believe. And we'll do better. I'll do better by the grace of God. We invite you to become a member. You can go to my Facebook page. There are 3 places where you can see me, or maybe even 4. I've not done a good job, and that's why I hired somebody to help me out in regard to that. I've not done a good job, so I don't claim that I've done a good job in regard to this. But on Facebook, we have 3 places. My own, you can see Dennis L. Waters, that's me. And I like to be in this kind of shirt here in my office. I've got some interesting things that are in the back. There are a number of items, pictures that I have framed that are from Egypt, where I went in 2005. And then we went to Kenya. We've got the pictures from that as well. And then also the work that we've done with individuals, we'll post those from time to time. So there's my own page. There's also Restore Executive Life and Leadership Coaching and Consulting. That is the page for the coaching company. And we'll do a better job, I promise. I promise I will. And then also there's I Will Restore. That's the nonprofit as well. That's under Spirit of Victory and Praise International Spiritual Center. And then also there is Spirit of Victory and Praise International Spiritual Center. So those are the places that we have online that have to do with Facebook. And depending on where you are, You can email us at info@iwillrestore.com. You can email me at admin@real-coach.com. Our websites are iwillrestore.org and iwillrestore.com, and then also real-coach.com. We're doing a better job in regard to that. There are classes there. There's musical offerings at each one of those. But, of course, it's when we have your email address that we can share some of that with you. We also have postings of music that is on SoundCloud. And what we teach basically is that in the person, when it comes to praying, you can pray the ABCs of prayer. It seems rather simple, and it is. The aspect of praying we teach, ABCs of prayer, is ask, believe, claim by returning thanks. And prayer, it is the consistency of prayer. That's why we talk about revolve, evolve. And I just recently read something where it was talking about revolve, evolve. The actual words of revolve, evolve was in a writing that was written in the late 1900s. And so those words are there in regard to that. And it's talking about the same idea. Is the revolve is going around something, and in this case, an idea. It is a constant repeating of an idea, but it's not repeating it at the same level of thought. You're moving up each time to another level of thinking. And the evolve is what I mean by moving up. Your thinking about it is elevating, is coming up each time. And we use metaphors and stories to help you to understand that and then to actually do it. So it's not just a story, it's a story with meaning. Even if we're talking about the Bible, it's not intended to just be a story. It's intended to be a story that has a meaning, and we are successful when we have you to grasp what the meaning is. So that's vital. And even listening to something, I'm now seeking to listen and learn different languages. And that becomes important as we go forth in the world, because please understand that all the world is here in the U.S., and it's because the U.S. has been in all the world. And so we need to have different languages. We need more than just simply speaking English. We need to speak Spanish. We need to speak French. We need to speak Hindi. We need to speak Swahili. We need to speak different languages all over the world. Arabic. We need to speak different languages. That's my point. Latin. We need to speak that. All of these things. We need to speak Hebrew. And I believe that young people should learn, be multilingual from a very young age. I've got some friends that have their children learning French and Spanish when they are younger than 10 years old. They just understand, and doing math and science and everything else. This is the age for that. And all of this will help to remove whatever we consider to be racism and everything else in regard to that. There's no excuse anymore. And you can begin teaching your children before you ever get pregnant, before anything else. And the best way is to learn yourself, move yourself, become your authentic self. And that's who we're trying to reach in regard to what we're doing, are individuals who are determined, who are committed to be world changers because they change the world inside of themselves, who are committed in regard to that. Because the moment that you change, you probably change the life of 100 people or 1,000 people. You impact the world in regard to that. And if we do it now, we will have less to be upset about in the next year or the next 2 years or the next 5 years. Just 1, 2, 10, 100 people. We can change the entire world in a generation. Just do it now. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm here. We can change the world in a generation. It can be another heaven on earth, as they say. Not just a scientific evolution, but a whole evolution of everything. Don't let AI move faster than human intelligence, human moral character. Don't let AI move faster than what we're doing as far as wisdom. AI, somebody asked, does AI have a soul? As far as I'm concerned, no. No, it does not. It does not feel. It doesn't even think. It repeats, as far as I'm concerned. It is vital. It is vital. I have sought to learn coding and everything else in regard to this stuff. Now, again, I thought I had finished education, but people say lifelong learning. That is so true. So I know this is long. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to stop. Let me just get some music going, because please understand, it's vital. I've gone too long. I apologize, but I do have assurance. I do know that God is God. There's no question in my mind that we are God's children. That's why we can change. And I celebrate this. So I'm going to just play. The next step in this is adoration, where we celebrate the divine. Within us, yes. And the divine that we know is all around us, yes. The beauty of nature, all of that, the stars in the sky. The text says the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. We celebrate the divine. It's called worship. It's called recognizing God. So I'm going to play a little bit of that, and then we're going to go on. So we've done 4 steps, or done 3. Assurance is really knowing who you are, knowing who you are. So here's adoration. Let me say that I think of adoration and worship as being in liminal space. Liminal space. It is between the tick and the talk. And what I mean by that, you can go forward or backwards. But you're between the tick and the talk. It's the place of the most brilliant change that you could ever. Take care. Blessings to you. Bye-bye.